ever looked at one of your favorite coaches and wondered how they seem to be everywhere? You probably think that they have a large team, a big budget, or a lot of support. And while that may be true, that's actually not the case for everybody. In this episode, I'm sharing how you can repurpose a single podcast episode across multiple platforms to help you get the most out of the content that you have created. You don't need to work harder. You don't need to have a huge team or a large budget. What you need is what we're going to talk about in this episode. So are you ready? Let's dive in. Hey, I'm Lucy Reyes, your host of the Cheerful Productive Chats podcast, where I'm on a mission to help online entrepreneurs like you focus on all the right things and kiss overwhelm goodbye. Here, you're going to learn strategies that will boost your productivity so that you can scale your online biz and impact lives sooner. It's your time to shine, so let's get started. Hey, welcome back to the Cheerful Productive Chats podcast. This is the final episode of this episode series where we were talking about how you can really maximize the content that you create to make the most sales. We're all about efficiency around here. We want to help you get the most out of the little time that you have to work on your online business. And so this episode is going to wrap it all up by sharing how you can really take what you have created and repurpose it across multiple channels. So to recap the previous episodes, in case you haven't listened to them, if you go back to episode 66, this is where we talked about what the first step to creating content that sells is, and it's not actually creating the content itself. So if you haven't listened to that episode yet, definitely go back and listen to that. Then from there, we went on to episode 67, where we talked about how you can leverage the content that you are creating now to maximize the sale. So it could be a blog post, a podcast episode, a YouTube video, whatever form of long form content that you're creating. We talked about how you can leverage that and how you can structure it in a way that's going to help you increase your sales. And then lastly, in last week's episode, we talked about how you can really track those promotional email campaigns to turn leads into customers. So one of your marketing channels is probably sending email newsletters, which is a super profitable way, as you may have heard. We talked about it in that episode where email marketing is kind of where it's at, right? It's where it's at. And so you really want to know your numbers, make those decisions based on actual facts, actual data. And so we talk about that in that episode. And this one, we're going to talk about how you can repurpose a single long form piece of content. I'm using the example of this podcast, but it could also be your blog post, your YouTube video, so that way you can get the most out of it. And if you are following the structure that we talked about, then you're really going to exponentially increase the amount of sales that you get with your evergreen content. So let's talk about how you can repurpose a single blog post or a single podcast episode across multiple platforms, over 4 platforms. So this is how I do it. This is the way I do the repurposing and how it all gets started. So I'm going to walk you through where I really repurpose my podcast to, in what formats, and the different tools that I use to make this process super easy. So I have started recording my podcast episodes as videos. So you might be watching this on YouTube or you might be listening to it on the podcast. But recording my podcast episodes as video content has made it super easy, has made it so much easier to repurpose into multiple types of content pieces across multiple platforms. But even if you're just doing an audio podcast, then you're still able to repurpose to some of the same platforms, but just in different formats, okay? But I do my video recording. I just wanted to throw that out there so that we kind of understand how I'm then able to create these different content. All right, so here are the different ways that I repurpose my podcast episodes and where I post them to. So I start by recording my one video podcast, right? This is the one video. I'm recording it right now. And essentially everything that I'm about to cover is literally what I'm going to be doing next once I'm done recording this episode. So I record this one episode. I then upload the video to YouTube, but adding it to YouTube also gives me that embeddable coding that I can then add to a blog post, that I can add to my communities elsewhere, right? So I upload it to YouTube, and then I also upload it to this tool that I use that's called Vizard. And this tool chops up my video and turns it into multiple reels. So I can then choose which reels I want to use and upload onto Instagram or LinkedIn. You could add it to TikTok. You could add it to YouTube Shorts. Wherever you are already on, you can upload those reels there. So I use that tool. It turns the content into reels for me, so I'm not having to do it myself. I then use the transcript portion of the podcast episode and turn that into a blog post. I use partial pieces of the transcript and use it as the email newsletter. I also break it down and use it as social media captions. So all of this is being done with my one podcast episode, okay? So that is how I repurpose all of these different things. The email newsletters and the captions can then be repurposed even further for the future. So for example, my email newsletters, if it got good engagement, if I send it out in real time and it got good engagement, good open rates, good click-through rates, then I might consider putting it into my evergreen value sequence, where I'm then just sending them this email newsletter to this specific podcast on autopilot. So that's one way. Another way is that the captions can also be just slightly tweaked and repurposed in the future on your same social media channels for a different post. So you can, maybe you posted it the first time as a reel. Well, you just take the same caption, tweak it slightly, and now share it with a carousel post or a static post. You can reuse the same content over and over and over again. And I keep all of this stored inside of a content bank in Trello. So I'm going to get to which systems I'm specifically using in just a second. But that's how you can repurpose your audio, your video, and the transcript portion across these different platforms. An episode not only needs to be shared as a reel, you can also share it as a static post or a carousel post. And then you might also, if you're on Pinterest, you might want to create at least 4 to 6 pins to also share on Pinterest to continue driving traffic to that blog post / podcast episode / YouTube video. So if you were to check out the link in the show notes, which takes you back to the blog post that this episode lives on, you're gonna see that I have turned the transcript into a blog post. There's also a link to the video on YouTube. So no matter how you want to consume the content, you get all 3 formats on the same link. There's the podcast player at the top of the page. There's, you scroll down and there's the link or the embeddable HTML code to the YouTube video right there on the page. You can just hit play straight from my own page. And then if you keep scrolling down further, you see that the transcript has been turned into somewhat of a blog post. No matter how you want to learn, no matter how you want to consume the content, all 3 formats are there. And then lastly, I also share the completed podcast episode to my own student client only community inside of Heartbeat. I also share it in other communities where they allow promotion. So that way I can keep, new fresh eyes coming to my podcast. So these are all the different ways that I specifically share my podcast episode, one podcast episode across all of these different platforms. And it doesn't have to take long at all. You might be listening to this list and you're like, whoa, that sounds like a lot of work. That sounds like a lot to do. But truly, you're maximizing the amount of time that it took you to record this one episode. So I'm looking at the time now. This episode so far, it has been like 10 minutes long. I'll probably edit it down to a few minutes before that. But it's taking 30 minutes, let's say, to record the content, and then you edit it, you do some of these extra steps, and it's around content that you have already created. Likely it's evergreen content that people can still get value out of for years and years to come. So it's well worth putting in a couple of extra minutes here and there to get some of these different things done. But it doesn't have to take you hours upon hours upon hours to get all of it done, because if you have systems and workflows in place, then that helps you stay on top of all of the different things that you have going on. So for me specifically, to repurpose this one podcast across the different formats and the different channels, the different platforms that I want to share it on, I have a Trello board specifically for each part of the process. So I have a Trello board for my podcasting task, a Trello board for my blogging task, like the actual blog post, for creating and sending the email newsletters, for publishing on Instagram, Pinterest, and LinkedIn. Each one of those has its own Trello board because, the algorithms are very different across each one. And so I keep those separate. I talk about more of why I do this back in, I'll link to the episode, but it's the episode around the minimum 4 bucket system. I also have a content ideas bank where all of the content that I create lives inside of this Trello board. So that way I can easily pick out of it whenever I'm kind of having this writer's dump or this writer's block where I just don't know what to post. I don't know what to write. I can always go to this content bank and see the whole list of, currently there's over 300 ideas just listed on this content bank that, has all of these ideas that I've already created in the past. So each one of these has its own board or system. And then on top of that, I use Vizard for creating the reels as an AI tool. I use Canva to create the designs. I use a Marketing Magic. It's another AI tool to help me create the written content. So they have a feature called Transcript Magic, which is amazing. So I just upload my podcast episode to that, and it gives me so many different options on how I can repurpose that transcript into social media captions, email newsletters, marketing channels, so many other things that I don't even use, but it gives me the option to do. I put it into that tool and it helps me just write the things, the written portions, so much faster. And then lastly, if I'm scheduling anything static, so a static image, a static graphic, or carousel post to Instagram, I put that into Publier, which is my social media scheduling app. So that way I don't have to do it like in the moment. But if it's reels, then I just use my Trello board to manually send me those reminders to my phone to post in the moment. When you have proper systems in place, it just makes it so much easier for you to maximize the work that you're already doing and getting the most out of the content that you have already created. You don't need a large team. You don't need a large budget to repurpose your content across multiple platforms, across multiple formats. You don't need to do that. What you need are the systems that are going to help make it easier for you to do this, okay? Inside of the System Savvy Society, that's exactly what we're creating. We're all working together to help you create efficient and strategic systems for your business to help you get more of the things that you need to get done so much easier, so much faster, and so much better. Because maybe without systems, you just record the podcast episode, you publish it, you manually create your reels, you post it on Instagram, and then that's it. Maybe you send an email newsletter for it, but then that's it. But as you can see, you can take that a bit further and a bit further and a bit further and really make the content that you create work for you. Not just now, but to have something for you to reuse in the future. So having systems in place really makes this whole process so much easier. And inside a System Savvy Society, that is exactly what we're doing. Every single month you get a new Savvy solution, which walks you through a new system to implement in your business. Sometimes it's a specific spreadsheet. Like last month, we had the email performance tracking spreadsheet, which was really helping you dig into those email metrics and really understand how to analyze the data in a simplified way so that way you can make strategic decisions that increase your sales in the future. Then another month, we were focusing on the content bank. So we built out this content bank inside of Trello so that way you have this place where you can repurpose and pull your ideas from, add new ideas as you create new content. All of this is inside of the System Savvy Society. So if you want to learn more about that, and this was just one thing that you get as a member, then go ahead and check out the link in the show notes. It's at cheerstoproductivity.com/SSS to learn more. Or you can also visit the Cheerful Productivity shop if you just want some Trello templates so that way you can play and play, do it yourself. That's available at cheerfulproductivity.com. I hope that you found this series super helpful. We really dive deep into how you can make your content work more for you and to help you increase sales in your business. Next week, we're going to be switching gears a bit. We have a wonderful guest coming on to the podcast. So if you haven't subscribed, then please follow or subscribe to the podcast so that way you know whenever new episodes are released. And I will talk to you again next week. Thank you so much for listening to the Cheerful Productive Chats podcast with me, Lucy Reyes. To see the full show notes and all the links mentioned in today's episode, visit cheerstoproductivity.com/69. And before you go, make sure you follow or subscribe wherever you're listening so you know once the next productive chat is released. Talk soon, and cheers to your productivity and success.